45 feature films, creating hundreds of sustainable family wage jobs, and brought millions of dollars here into Eastern Washington. We've created a brand new industry here in this region, brand new industry. You know, I love Eastern Washington. I believe in the promise of its people and the strengths of its values. But I also believe to realize our wonderful potential, we need a representative who will fight for the interests of our region, who will be dedicated to getting something done and to actually help people rather than pushing some political agenda. Today, Congress is broken. It has the lowest approval rating in history. Rather than solving problems, they're more interested in winning political points. Its focus is dedicated to protecting the interests of the other Washington, not our Washington. We need to bring back that spirit of cooperation. We have that. That dedication to the American people that has been missing from our representation. We need to get past this partisan bickering and start doing what's right for all of us, for all of us. Your representative should be working for this Washington. Now, creating more jobs and keeping them here is my top priority. I'm the only candidate with real-world business experience and a history of actually creating jobs. And I ran Northwest on the principles of good business. We stayed out of debt, we paid our workers family wages, and we put the success of the company above personal enrichment. We built for the long-term success, not short-term gain. Now, these are the values our country needs right now. And those are the values I promise to bring to Congress. Now, I made a movie a few years ago called The Basket. I don't know if anybody remember that or not. And the main theme was, together we shall fly. Together we shall fly. Today, that is more true than ever. We need to come together and get down to solving our problems. Together, we need to take on the issues that matter to Eastern Washington, like creating jobs, preserving Social Security and Medicare, and protecting veterans' benefits. Now, I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to speak today. And, you know, forums like this define the choice that you have and allow you to choose who you want to send to Congress. I thank you, and I would appreciate your vote.
Rogers is not here, is that correct? Okay. All right, we will move on to Randall Yearout, who's also running for U.S. Representative.
Thank you very much. I think this is as many people as I've ever seen from Clarkston in one place before. I'm Randall Yearout. I'm running for the U.S. House in the 5th District. State here. The reason that I am running is because there is a need for Constitution to be put in the forefront of American thinking today, and mainly in the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. We have a tremendous amount of activities that our United States Congress is engaged in today. And I'll tell you something about myself and then finish that statement. I've spent most of my life in the building trades. I've worked all around the Pacific Northwest. The last 10 years been right here in Eastern Washington. I owned a saddle shop, ran that, built saddles, repaired tack, and so forth. And I have a pretty good handle on what happens when that industry takes a hit, because I talk to those guys all the time. I ran a little bit of an excavation outfit, dump trucking and so forth. And you know what I find today that didn't used to happen 20 years ago. When we sit down for lunch on the tailgate of a pickup today, you know what the topic almost invariably goes to? What in the heck has the federal government done today? There's too much government, isn't there? Yeah, you're darn right. The Constitution provides a way for us to limit the size of government, but it doesn't appear that anybody wants to do that. Nobody who's back there, anyway. Now, we have most of our Congress, if they're compared against the Freedom Index, some of our most conservative ones vote constitutionally 50% of the time. Maybe 60% of the time. I say most of the time is not good enough. If you went to the doctor, you want him to be right about your diagnosis most of the time. If you get on an airplane, you want the pilot to land the plane correctly most of the time. No. But those are examples that involve one person or maybe 300 people. We're talking about a nation of hundreds of millions of people. We can't afford to land this plane correctly most of the time. I've spent the last 10 years as a volunteer teaching the Institute on the Constitution. I have a fairly good idea what the founders intended for this nation to run like. That is the kind of knowledge that I intend to take to Washington, D.C. As it stands today, 535 men in Washington, D.C. determine whether this nation rises or falls. That's because there's too much federal government. I think if a state wants to get engaged in a program that lets it fail, okay, at least it doesn't take the other 49 down with it. Today, all 50 go down together, and I think you can see the writing on the wall. I'm Randall Yearout. I appreciate your vote. I have information back here. I'll be willing to talk to you later. Be happy to talk to you later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We are going to take a brief break here so that all of you can ask some questions. We do ask that you keep your questions brief, be respectful, and that they are relevant to the office that they are seeking. Also, if you break out into a speech, we will be asking you to stop. So, okay.
Based on what Mr. Yearout just said, I have a pretty good idea what his answer to this question is going to be, but I'll hear it anyway. But I'd like to start with the other gentleman. The Environmental Protection Agency is absolutely out of control. It's demonstrated by their enforcement of the Clean Water Act in outrageous ways in places around the country. One of the most recent being the Sackett case in northern Idaho, in which this Supreme Court voted 9-0 against the Environmental Protection Agency's attempt to take these people's property. If you're elected to this office, what will you do to rein in the Environmental Protection Agency?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you, sir. We need to have a balance between the two. We do have one shot at this planet, our infrastructure. It's our God-given infrastructure. So we need to do what we can to protect it. However, I agree with you that oftentimes bureaucrats do go a little too far, and they don't always come up with common sense, practical solutions to our everyday problems, because they don't live here. And so I agree that we need to have a sensible approach to this. But we still do need to have the fundamental value of preserving our God-given infrastructure, and I think you would agree with that, sir. Thank you.
Environmental Protection Agency is a bureau, if you will, of fallible men, they invariably will have an agenda that is influenced by, among other things, lobbyists, which need to be a foreign object in Washington, D.C., for the most part, I believe. Environment is, in a small measure, a national concern. I believe that our technology and our advances in science today has made it possible for the individual states to take care of what goes on inside their own borders. Thank you very much, Washington, D.C. And I think the Environmental Protection Agency needs to be, well, you know what it's like when you put a shank on a naughty colt. You give him a good jerk, get his attention. I think that'd be something to be useful for the EPA. They do not have the authority to ride roughshod over private property within the Union States. Thank you.
If you have questions, if you wouldn't mind coming and stand over here so that we can get the mic to easier.
If you have the opportunity, are you going to vote to repeal Obamacare?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? No. I believe in the Affordable Care Act. There are many provisions of that act that are provisions we all agree with. For example, pre-existing conditions. Those go away. You know, women will no longer have to pay more than men for health care. We can have our young people up to the age of 26 on our health care plans. Those are good things, and those are things I believe all of us agree with, for the most part. So I do agree with the Affordable Health Care Act and what we can do. I do believe that we can make it better. It's not a perfect law. In fact, there's a lot of things I don't like about it either. But just to throw it completely away and get rid of all the great things that are in it, to me, doesn't make sense.
Well, I will say unequivocally I disagree with that opinion. I think Obamacare needs to be dealt with. There are some very important American principles that we have to remember when we're talking about an egregious violation of the public rights like this. The Code of the West is what I call it. It's I guess, the blue-collar layman's way of referring to the rule of law. But what it says to me is, if it is unlawful for me to reach in to Rich's pocket and take his money, it's unlawful for me to tell my butler to do it for me. The United States government is your butler. And you cannot, nobody, can tell him to take somebody else's property or tell them how to spend it. That's un-American. It's stupid, and it's a way to go down the road to destruction. I hope that was clear enough. Thank you.
Mr. Yearout, when you introduced yourself, you said you were a strict constitutionalist. The Supreme Court just said Obamacare was constitutional. So how do you support repealing something that the Supreme Court said was constitutional, and you say you're a constitutionalist?
The Constitution states pretty plainly that the federal court, the Supreme Court, can be checked by the other branches of government. Now, to abolish Supreme Court justices, as far as I am aware in the Constitution, do not have license to violate the public rights. There is constitutionally remedy for judges or any other public official under the United States, that's local, state, federal, if they violate the public rights, that is denominated as a misdemeanor. Now, I don't care if it's a Supreme Court judge or a president of the United States or a congressman or a senator, if the man or woman violates the public rights by demanding that we use our property in a way that we don't want to do, the remedy is impeachment and removal from office. As a matter of fact, the Constitution demands it. It requires impeachment and removal from office for high crimes and misdemeanors. That does not, ma'am, insulate U.S. Supreme Court justices from the law.
You know, I come from business. I'm a business person, and that's my background. And I'm always looking for solutions that save money. And also what's right for people. Right for people and save money. And with healthcare, we've got to come up with a plan that saves us money and also covers all of us. And this is a win-win. Now you talk about picking my pocket, Mr. Yearout. Here's where I'm a little confused, because if you don't have medical insurance and you go to an emergency room or some medical facility, let's say you're in a car wreck or something like that, you're using all these facilities and you're sort of picking the pocket of me, the taxpayer, or somebody who's buying medical insurance, because all that has to be. So you can't really look at it as buying a television or something like that. This is medical care. And we need to be efficient with it. And we also need to have access for everybody. And this is the only way we can do it. So I'm all for saving money. And I want to save money for you, sir, and for me. And I don't want to pick your pocket, you don't want to pick my pocket, but let's work together and come up with a plan that works for all of us.
Should Congress be able to pass legislation that does not pertain to them? Should Congress be able to pass legislation that does not pertain to them? In other words, can you pass laws that pertain to all American citizens except Congress?
I don't think anybody's above the law, but I think legislation needs to be lawful. That means that it needs to pursue the intent of the Constitution, not political expediency or the need to do something regardless of the consequences. And this is why we're in the position we're in today, because of the law of unintended consequences. You realize that voting for a piece of legislation back in 2007 and I'll go back to, Rich, I'll go back to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Legislation was passed in 2007 that granted medical care to families that had incomes 300% above poverty level in the United States. And that was an incremental run-up, if you will, to Obamacare, the law of unintended consequences. I don't think the people that voted for that knew what was going to be in part and parcel of it. But Kathy McMorris was one of them. We need to be able to see the consequences in the principles, and therefore deny the consequences by denying the principles. There's a little bit more forethought required in legislation than it appears on the surface.
I believe Congress should have the same medical plan that we all have. And not special privileges, like their own barber shop, things like that. Their own parking space at the airport. What? Yeah, Frankie Mount, things like that. And we all, you know, I actually am going to be part of a caucus called Fix Congress Now. And what that means is if we don't pass a budget, a real budget by October 1st of every year, members don't get paid, period.